All right, welcome back, and we're remembering Mr. Luke Ford, Coach Luke Ford. You could call him many things, principal, just a great person. And if you met him, you never forgot him. He was always interested in the kids, and certainly we're very pleased today, once again, to have our panel. Mark Norman is with us. He knew him well. Deborah Raziano, she knew him well. We have the mayor, certainly Tommy S.J., knew him well. We have Glenn Chance, who met him by chance, I guess we could say, and had a great relationship with him, and Terry Boudreau, who played basketball and other sports under Coach Luke Ford, knew him well. And it came time on the show, we'll start it a little differently today, came time on the one-on-one show where I always ask that question. That when I'm asking them the question, and they're young enough not to really think of the day that they're not going to be with us, I always ask them about the one word they would like to be remembered by. We had a chance to talk about that.
What's the one word that you would describe yourself, or that John would describe you, or that everybody else who's been around you would describe? What's that one word they would say about Luke Ford that would resonate with you?
Loyalty.
Loyalty, there you go.
I think I told you already, loyalty. And loyalty is not always saying yes. Sometimes you have to say no for the good of that person.
Loyalty. Sometimes you have to say no for the good of the person. Terry, it came off his lips pretty easy, but that is a very difficult thing to do.
It is, especially in the position that he was in for 15 years. You always want to try to make somebody happy, and sometimes you have to tell them no. And when you tell them no, they're not going to be happy, but that's just the way life goes.
Absolutely. And Glenn, I mean, I've heard a lot of people say it before, but they just can't, they can't do it. They can't say no. Me and Mark went in meetings with him before where he just came right out and said, no, we're not going to do it that way. And we're like, okay, you're the boss.
Yes, sir.
So, but he had a way of saying no. It wasn't a degrading no.
He did it in a way that made you feel like you won something at the end anyway. I was able to see him spend a lot of time with his family in that capacity, where he was, he was such a loyal family man and loving man. And I think, while a lot of people will remember him differently, I can't find anybody in town who had anything bad to say about the man. And that says something. I don't know if I can say that about many people, but he's definitely one of those people.
And Debbie, coming to you, and I think what Glenn said is true, but because he was fair and because consistent, the way he came across consistently, you sort of knew where he was, didn't you?
Always knew where he was, always. I mean, he was spot on. He had that second sense that you knew that he was loyal, and you just knew that he had it, and that when you talked with him or worked with him, you knew that you never had to worry about another thing. If he said he was going to do it, just like when you're one-on-one, then you knew doggone good and well that it was going to get done. And I want to say one thing more about being loyal to Nichols. This man was tremendously loyal to Nichols. You saw him at academics, athletics, fundraisers. He was everywhere. And that is going to be a big void for our university, because he was there up to the end.
Yeah. Mayor, I don't think he could have picked a better word, loyal.
No, and what goes along with loyalty, and what I think of is commitment. I think of that word when you look at Coach, and like Deb was saying, when I was involved in the Alumni Association, when I served as president, was back when it wasn't so cool to be a Nichols fan. But there wasn't that many people there. But if you scanned the room, or you looked around the back, or you looked under the tent, there was always a constant. It was Luke Ford. And he was there when it wasn't so cool to be a Nichols fan. And that's what really hit home with me when we think about what we're going to lose in a person like that is, again, a loyal, committed individual. And we're going to miss him.
Yeah. Mark, I think you probably heard me say it when I used to run into him everywhere when we were filming. I always said, you have a twin? Because there wasn't much he missed.
Absolutely. Like I said, he was a pillar in the community, and I was thinking, you know, he garnered a lot of respect, and that was the word I would think of him as, respect. When he stood up and spoke at the Lions Club meeting, he was like the OEF Hutton commercials. Everybody was quiet. You know, he earned that respect from everyone.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And as we were closing the one-on-one, and I wanted to make sure I thanked, and there's certain people I thank on the one-on-one, but when you're talking to a guy like Mr. Ford, you really want him to hear it. And let's show you how we ended the one-on-one.
Very, very good point. Just want to thank you for everything that you've done for the area. I know we can't normally get in a whole lot in an hour, but I just respect you so much, because when I'm with you and I see people the way they respect you, and I remember you as a young athlete and seeing, you know, we used to notice, believe it or not. Y'all didn't know maybe who we were, but we knew who y'all were, and that says a lot about a person. And I want to thank you for what you've done. I mean, you're way up there on the list.
I want to thank you for feeling that way about me. I really appreciate that, and thank you so very much.
Well, I'm not the only one that feels that way. They got a lot of people that feel
Thank
that
you,
way.
Lord.
Thank you.
And many other people who feel that way have joined us, and many of the people who couldn't join us on the set absolutely feel that way. And if you're watching out there in the TV world, Mr. Luke Ford was certainly one of a kind. He was a legend. He'll always be a legend, and we appreciate every single thing that that man did for this community. Rest in peace. All right, welcome back. Remembering Mr. Luke Ford, and Mark Norman joins us now. And Mark, you knew him quite well. We worked together in the Lions Club games quite a bit. But just give me your general thoughts. Just a sad day.
Yeah, it was. When I got the call the other day, it was very sad. And, you know, the first thing I thought of, I said, man, if Webster's defined a grandpa, they ought to have his picture. I just thought he was just the ideal grandparent and person. And that was the first thing that came to my mind.
You know, a lot of people didn't realize that Mr. Luke did a one-on-one with me, because he took us years to get him over here, for one. But I want to roll in the first segment about his early days and where he grew up. So let's roll that in if we can.
Let's go way back. Let's go to the earliest days that you can remember to sort of set the scene, and tell us a little bit about yourself and where you grew up and all that good stuff.
I grew up in Thibodaux, in the earliest, well, I can remember, the earliest I want to start with is on Guyan Street, which is now, they changed the name of the street now, I really don't know. But anyway, it was just a couple blocks away from where Governor Nichols lived, which is now Nichols Mall. Nichols Mall is where Governor Nichols lived. And we lived there when I first started school when I was 6 years old. And saw the old house burn in 1940. And it was very, very cold at that time. I can remember it was freezing that day. But that was 1940, and that's where we lived, and we would walk to school from there to Mount Carmel, and also to Thibodaux College, and that's way on the west side of town.
You hear people all the time saying that they walked to school, and we laugh, but you really did walk to school.
We certainly did walk to school. We walked to school for a while, because the buses didn't start until in the early 40s, I believe, or, you know, 41, 42, 43, something like that.
How long a walk was that?
It's a good mile. It's a good mile.
You had your own cross-country team before you even got to school, didn't you?
Well, we did. We were pretty good at walking quick. And besides that, we'd come home for lunch and then go back to school.
So if I'm counting right, that's 4 miles.
Yeah.
So you were in pretty good shape growing up.
Oh, we sure were.
All right, Mark, we come back to you, and see, I can't calculate.
Yeah, you're right.
Vanderbilt guys can calculate.
Yeah, right.
That's 4 miles. But when was the first time you met Mr. Ford, or coach?
1992, I was hired at Thibodaux High to coach under him, and coach stayed there for 3 years. But I really got to know him later on in life through the Lions Club in Manresa.
when we'd have those meetings on the Lions Club game, he was loose and funny and energetic, but he wasn't always like that, was he?
Oh, absolutely not. As a principal, I remember getting called in, you know, as a coach, we all went in his office and very, very serious. It was like the old days when I used to get called in the principal's office, which I had a good memory of that. And but he really had a sense of humor that a lot of people didn't know about. You know, that he had a kind heart and a great sense of humor.
You know, also, when talking about Mr. Ford, we talked about the athletes. Whenever we played against anybody whose last name was Ford, they were a pretty good athlete. I asked him about that on the one-on-one.
The Ford name is synonymous, too, with good athletes. When I was going to Vanderbilt, of course, there always was a Ford on the other side playing for the other team that was a pretty good athlete. Just blessed with a lot of athletes in the family, I guess.
Well, yeah, we played everything. In those days, you played every sport there was because that's the only thing we had to do, really. I think it was good for us in those days that I really feel as though students today have too much to do. They have too many things that can take them away from playing sports, and it usually does sometimes. You know?
And then they go inside and play the video games, and
Oh, yeah.
a lot of competition with the coaches who want them to play sports.
Right, exactly. But we had good times, and we played all the time. We never passed up a sport.
All right, before I go back to Mark, I want to just go back to another clip where he talked about his parents having a 3rd and 4th grade education, and he sort of broke the barrier going to college.
Mama and Dad had a 3rd or 4th grade education, like you said. You become a principal at Thibodaux High School. You become an educator first and then a coach. They must have instilled in you something pretty strong for you to get there.
They certainly did. They certainly did. I was the first in our family to finish college. All my uncles and aunts and their children, I was the first. But since then, more have finished college. But they really did instill the importance of education and what we need to do in order to better ourselves. And I'll never forget that for that.
All right, Mark, with about 30 seconds left, let's clue. What did he mean to you?
And he meant so much, you know, just reminiscing, going to old ball games and whatnot, and sitting with them. And, you know, he always had put the kids first. You know, even with the Lions Club All-Star game, he wanted to do the All-Star game, but he wanted to make sure we gave a scholarship to one of them kids to go to Nichols, and that was most important to him. Always put the kids first.
Joining me now, the mayor of Thibodaux, Mr. Tommy S.J. And Mayor, welcome. What's your first recollection of Mr. Ford?
Well, you know, it's a little bit different than everybody else because my first recollection was his relationship with one of our city employees, Miss Betty Ford, his wife, who was an employee for the city for 30-plus years. And everybody at City Hall knew Miss Betty, right? And we always heard about Coach. Well, you know, my first encounter with him was really after his retirement and when I got involved in Nichols State University Alumni, Affairs organization. And that's when I got to really know what he was all about, the kind of person he was, his commitment to his family, his commitment to his community, moreover, his commitment to that university. Mm-hmm. In years past, we look at the things that he said and did, and it wasn't, you didn't hear a lot from him, but you saw it in all that he did. His sense of pride, the fact that he loved kids, he loved education, the fact that he loved his community. And to see the way he interacted and he committed his energy to every organization he was with, whether it was a Lions Club, like Pop said, or, well, I'm sure you talk more about, the alumni affairs and the university and how he committed to making those organizations the best they could be.
The key, too, when during the one-on-one program, I asked him about his service. He was in the Army. So a lot of times, people went to the Army and it interrupted their education. And I asked him about that, and listen to his answer here.
I was in Europe for 2.5 years.
You were sort of in between, huh?
Yeah, it was in between, yeah.
Yeah, got lucky. But you came back after being in the service for 3 years and then took it upon yourself to go back to college. How did you get the momentum back? Most people would have shut it down at that point.
Well, I never shut it down because I took one course when I was in the service through the University of Maryland. We had a junior college in Munich, Germany, and this professor would come to our posts once a week and present to us the. It was an economics course that I took at that time. In fact, a friend of mine from Homer here was in that class with me, Dr. Nolan Lecomte.
Okay, yeah, I'll be.
I never shut it down. So he could have shut it down, but he was determined being the key word, to get an education.
Absolutely, and he wanted to be active. He didn't want to fade off into the sunset after retirement. He wanted to be, like you said, he wanted to be involved in community service. It wasn't about him, and it wasn't about what he did or to try and go on accolades from people or to get notoriety for what he did, because that wasn't his mission. That wasn't his drive. You know, he just wanted to be a part of the community and all the good things that they're all about Thibodaux, but I think about the Bayou region too. And you know, coaches, you know, when you got to talk to him, they're quiet. At least I thought he was, till you got to talk to him. And look, I think like Terry, I'm a World War II buff. I could sit there and listen to someone tell stories and veterans tell stories. And I remember it was one alumni association meeting. We happened to be there a little early. I don't know how we got to talking about his service, but you know, he just went on and amazed me about how committed he was in that aspect of his life too. So, you know, again, the stories that he could tell and all of us that we can tell about him all comes down to the fact that he was a true gentleman and all about service to his community.
I asked him about the education, allowing him to further himself and become a principal. Here's what he had to say.
I want to get into your coaching career and your teaching career. I know they're one and the same, but they really are different, because the education allowed you to become principal at Thibodaux High School. Was that your first principal job at Thibodaux?
It was the only principal job I ever
Okay,
had.
what year did you take over as principal?
1979.
Okay.
And I ended, I was principal from 79 to 94.
Okay.
And then from there I went into the school board office for 4 years.
Right.
I taught 8 years at Thibodaux College from 58 through 66. 66 to 70 I was at East Thibodaux Junior High. In 1970 I went to Thibodaux High, and we were teacher coaches.
Okay, right. Teachers first.
Teaching first, and then you were a coach. And you could tell by the salary too.
Teacher coaches, and Mayor, with about a minute left, what's that loss going to do for the community?
You know, he was an ambassador not only for the organizations that he served in, but he was an ambassador for Thibodaux. He truly brought about the best in people. Everybody that got to really know him, he brought the best out in them. And there were some people that, you know, when we were sitting and discussing things maybe at Nichols for one of the alumni meetings, and they asked me, why do you call him Coach? What did he coach? And I said, hell, I don't know. I said, that's what everybody else called him, so that's what I called him. And I mean, it was a whole lot easier. I just couldn't see myself calling him Luke or Mr. Luke. It was always Coach. And that means that he touched hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of lives in his career as an educator. And that to me is just a tale of how committed he was, not only to his community, but to his profession. And that says a lot.
We are talking and certainly remembering Mr. Luke Ford, legend, like we described him in the second segment. Miss Debbie Raziano, they call her Raz, and you've seen her on one-on-ones and on our show plenty of times. What did Mr. Luke mean to you?
I loved Mr. Luke. He was most probably, well, I'm sitting in between two past presidents of the Alumni Federation, so I need to be careful. He never wanted to be president of the Alumni Federation, but he just meant the world to me. When I think back, Martin, about all the people that played towards help with my success, Mr. Luke is definitely in the top 5. He was my angel. He just always knew what to do to help me to get through situations. We were big into the golf tournaments where he loved those golf tournaments, and I did too. And we used to tell everyone, you can't just work on that golf tournament for 3 months. It's a year-round thing. So Mr. Luke and I decided to have a contest with each other about selling hole sponsors, okay? And I mean, one time they finally told us at Latour, could y'all quit selling hole sponsorships? We have too many signs out. I said, oh no, Mr. Luke and I have to keep going. And so he just had a way about him when he came to the office. They knew to let him in because he needed to talk about something that was important.
As I said before, when we played Thibodeau, either at home or away, and we'd see Mr. Luke, he was always this stern guy. I mean, I didn't see him smiling too much. Later on, I'd see he really was a fun person to be around, but I asked him about that in the one-on-one about the sternness. Let's listen in.
I used to watch you, of course, when I went to Vanderbilt, and of course, I knew you a lot longer before than you knew me. I mean, we all knew who Luke Ford was. You were always associated with sports, basketball teams, and of course, later, I graduated in 78, but you became principal in 79, but we always saw you walking around. Now, through the Lions Club and our football game that we do each year with you all, I really know the real Luke Ford now. But in those days when I would watch you, you were a stern-looking disciplinarian type guy. So I noticed you always had business on your mind as far as the school. Was that what it was really like?
You're right, Martin. I would stand in the halls and I would look past people I was speaking to at the time, because I was looking for something else. I didn't really want to find it, but I was looking for something else.
Right.
And it was just a mindset at that time that things had to be right and things had to be done. And but I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I got to tell you this, I just wish I were young enough to be able to do it again or to continue doing it. But I don't think someone my age can keep up with those
You ran a
children
tight
today.
ship back then, didn't you?
Well, I don't know if I ran a tight ship. I tried to run a fair ship, stern, as you say, but fair.
Right.
You know, and I think kids like that. I think children like to be told what they have to do. I really believe and feel that if they don't get that, they're missing something, and they feel as though they're missing something.
Yeah.
It was just like Mr. Luke to subtly correct me when I said tight ship, and he said fair ship. Would that be a good way to describe it?
That would be an excellent way to describe him. He served on our scholarship committee at Nichols, you know, on the alumni scholarship committee. And his #1 thing was he always wanted students to get the scholarships that really needed it, because everyone deserved a good education. And he wanted to be a part of that, as he did with he spoke about the Lions Club. He would work with Amanda Freeman when she was head of scholarships at Nichols on the Lions Club scholarships. And he just wanted to constantly expand on who got the scholarships. I think it was football, basketball, then he even included cheerleaders. He just wanted everyone to experience that, getting a good education. And he loved Nichols.
And me and Mark are chuckling inside because during that whole time we were doing the Bayou versus the river, all he wanted to know is who's getting the scholarships.
Right, right.
He was steadfast when it came to
Yes, he
scholarships.
was.
And what I want to do now, let's roll in another clip when he talked about the good things about being a principal and the not so good things.
The, I guess, crowning moments of being a principal, and what are some of the worst things about being a principal?
Well, some of the worst things about being a principal, I guess, some of the fights that we have at school, you know, things of that sort. And of course, the better things of being a principal was like when we won the state championship in 1992, things evened off. And when you have a good year in sports and things of that sort, in academics, because every year we had good years in academics, still good years in academics at Thibodeau High, at all schools. There's always someone who excels academically. You know, it's not always in the sports, but we still have it going, and it'll come back in cycles. It'll come back in cycles. It'll revolve and come right back.
All right, remembering Mr. Luke Ford, you could see that in him on that comment about the coach and the principal. Coaches and principals have a different way of looking at things than educators and principal. Neither is right or wrong, they just have a different way of looking at it. Glenn Chance joins us now, and Glenn, what's your recollection? First of all, when did you meet Mr. Luke Ford?
So, Martin, I've known Mr. Luke. I came to Nichols in the 80s, and probably in the early 90s, I got to know Mr. Luke. And my relationship with him, I call him Paul. That's another one of his nicknames. Through my friendship with his children, with Lisa and Johnny, I got to know the grandkids. So we've always called him Paul. And so I've known him for many years, and he's always been a great friend, mentor, storyteller. He was a funny, I know him a little bit differently than probably some of the students at Thibodeau High maybe remember him.
You know, and he was so soft-spoken at times. Sometimes you really had those meetings for the Bayou games, and we'd have to sit there and listen, because I think he did that by design. You know, you really listened and tuning into what he's saying. But during the one-on-one interview, I also talked to him about he's not one just to sit around and watch.
You've never been one to sit back and sort of wait for things to happen, especially with this Lions Club football game that we do. And I got to say this, HTV, the sponsor, but you go around talking to the coaches and the principals, and there's a certain respect that they have for you, because I see them during the game and they come up to you, and it's either Coach Ford or Mr. Ford. Either they're looking at you as the principal or as the coach. That's got to make you feel good that people remember what you did for them.
Well, I was the 15 years I was principal. I think I may have been the chairman of the district for 13 years or something like that. So I kind of stayed there a long time.
So you met a lot of people.
I met a lot of people, but I really enjoy going back to see these people and talking with them and trying to get them together. And they do come together. They're good people. They're just like you, Martin. They don't really have to do that, but they do it. They want to help kids. They want to do something for kids. And education, teachers have the kids and the students in mind at all times.
All right, before I go back to Glenn, I want to roll it in, because I've always said he just did it, sort of like Nike. Just do it. When he said he was going to do something, he did it. Let's roll that in.
There's a lot of people that say they want to do something, but when it comes time to hit in the streets, you can't never count on them to do it. But when you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. Where'd you get that from? Your mom or your dad? Who had the driving force there?
Both of them. Both of them.
You had a double whammy.
Both of them, Martin. And I'll say it again. I really feel good about my mother and father. They really tried to take care of all of us. They did take care of all of us, and they did whatever they could for us. But they always had get ahead in mind. Get ahead in mind.
And of course, that was a very vivid recollection when he said that, Glenn. When he told you he was going to do something, he's going to do it.
Yes, sir. And look, Martin, I spent the 2 weeks following Hurricane Ida. My family and I stayed with Mr. Luke, and we spent a lot of time together. And if he wanted to go outside and sit and look around, he wanted to do it. You know, towards the end of his life, he couldn't get around as easily as he could in his younger days. And so we would just sit and talk, and he would love to tell me stories about whether it was his coaching days, his military days. He would tell me a story about being in Munich and a young member of their platoon being stuffed in a locker, or, you know, and or he would tell me about a player that, you know, they played against when he was coaching. So he really enjoyed being around people and being out in the public and talking to people. I think that was something that stimulated him and that he really appreciated.
When you worked with him on the board, and he would break down into that storytelling mode, he could paint a pretty good picture when he was telling a story.
Yes, sir. And his eyes would squint, and you had to really look at him. And he knew how to capture people. And you know, he's a unique individual in the way that he would speak. He would pause periodically, and you're like left waiting to hear what he's going to say next. That was how Paul was. He could really hold a crowd, and he was a jokester. He was a prankster, and he always would take those moments to make jokes and pranks and make us laugh. So I really appreciated that about him.
You know, certainly in the hat. How many different hats did you see over the years?
I saw many, and in fact, my son was telling me he needs one just like it. He wants to wear one too. But I know over the last couple of weeks that we spent with Paul, I saw many hats, and he wasn't going to go outside without one. So.
And that's why I used to call him Indiana Ford. Still to this day, when I'm talking to Johnny recently after his death, I'm calling him Indiana Ford,
right,
because he'd had one that looked just like Indiana Ford.
He was like Tom Landry. You recognize him with that hat. And that's how a lot of people in Thibodaux, I'm sure, will remember him.
We're going to go to Terry Boudreau, who I watched as a young athlete. Of course, we're around the same age. He's a couple of years older than me, but a great athlete, played basketball. And those teams, was I dead on when we walked in the gym and we'd look over to the Thibodaux sideline? He wasn't smiling a lot.
No, he didn't smile a lot. He coached just like he was principal. He meant business. He was working at what he needed to accomplish, and there was not too many joking things going on at that time, for sure.
He must have been a heck of a poker player.
I guess he was. He was strict on the fundamentals. You know, he was a good basketball coach. He also coached me in football. But he was one of those guys where he patted you on the back when you did well, and he let you know when you wouldn't meet his standards, I can promise you.
You know, during the one-on-one I had with him, we always ask coaches about themselves, but then you always ask them, who did you fear playing the most? Because normally the ones they fear are very similar to them in preparation and discipline. So I was very curious to hear that answer. Let's roll it in.
Who are some of the other coaches in the area that I'm sure y'all have a good relationship, but that you probably feared to go against because you know they were going to be ready? And they're probably the same on your side.
Oh, yeah. Gerald Albert,
Yeah.
Bob Gunn, Rene LeBlanc, Steve Stahl, Brother Eldon. You knew Brother Eldon?
Eldon Crafassi.
Brother Eldon taught me a lot about basketball.
Really?
Oh,
I never knew that.
yeah. Well, he was at Donaldsonville Catholic High.
Was he? Okay.
Yeah. And Brother Ralph and Brother Louis Joseph. Brother Louis Joseph, he was a principal at Thibodaux High. I mean, at E.D. White. He was my third principal.
Yeah.
And he knew a lot about basketball. He was played at St. Aloysius in New Orleans. And the brothers took me, and they didn't make me, but they
molded you.
They molded me, and they were my mentors.
Yeah.
Those first three principals were my mentors. Brother Carroll, Brother Edwin Bonnet, and Brother Louis Joseph. Right. They were my mentors.
And that answer is a big secret to who shaped Coach Ford or Mr. Ford, the brothers. And I had the privilege of being taught by the brothers. When the brothers shaped you, they shaped you. whether you wanted it or not. And you could tell he took a deep breath before he talked about the brothers. They meant a lot to him.
And he was a mentor to me. I got my first teaching job and coaching job at Thibodeau High School, and he was the guy who hired me. And of course, the first thing we sat down in his office, he told me, "You're going to be a teacher here, and then you're going to be a coach here." And from that point on, you know, I followed everything he did. I coached there for many years, and of course, one day he called me in his office and said, "You know, you might not coach all your life." And I said, "Okay," because at that time I was coaching. And he said, "You might want to go back and get certified to be an administrator. We need some good administrators." And so he was the guy who actually pushed me to go and get certified to be an administrator. And of course, I learned quite a bit from him. I eventually was an administrative assistant there and sat there and absorbed as much as I can. And of course, one of the comments he was making earlier about being in the hall and not observing the obvious. And I used to tell that to all of our teachers when I was an administrator. You know, I'm not being rude when I don't look at you when we're talking. I'm watching what's going on. That's just a few of those things that I learned from him through the years.
What was your nickname for him while you were playing for him?
Coach.
You're not going there, huh?
No, he was coach. He was coach then, and he's coach now.
No
and
doubt.
That's how I know him as coach.
Well, let's roll in a tape. I asked him about nicknames. Here's what he said.
Everybody in Thibodeau has a nickname. Do you have a nickname? I always call you Mr. Ford. I hear them calling you Pop. I call you Pop now too because your son calls you Pop. But any nickname?
We some of the kids used to call me Cool Hand, but
Cool Hand Luke.
you know.
What we have here is a failure to communicate. Cool Hand, all right. Cool Hand Luke.
And then sometimes we would call Fliver. You remember the old Fords they would call Flivers sometimes?
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
No. Fliver?
Fliver, yeah.
You see, and I love that laugh. You know, I didn't see that laugh when we were playing Thibodeau, but that laugh got more and more as the years went by.
It did. It did. You really saw it come out of him after he retired, and he was relaxed, and he could be Luke Ford. But he was a very special person and a mentor to me for sure.
No, he was Cool Hand Luke.
I remember that, but I wasn't saying that.
Well, he said it for you. There
That's
you
right.
go. All right, we'll take a short break, and we'll be back with more. And remembering Mr. Luke Ford. Don't go away.